Greetings, and this is Rob again, Clan McCrae 9, and welcome back to the second video of my demonstration of Avalon Hill's Source of the Nile for the Vassal Module version 1.1. So we covered all of the menu buttons up at the top, and now I'd like to move on to the map here. I wanted to go back to the original Avalon Hill map with this module, and that was on the original version that I built. It's not unique to this 1.1 update, but I did want to point out that when I started building the module, I thought I would take it back to the original map. It's perhaps not Avalon Hill's most fancy map. In fact, it's probably pretty plain due to a couple of reasons. One, instead of showing the entire map of Africa, it just shows the southern portion. And the other thing is because you're going to be filling in the terrain as you play, most of the map is blank. So it gives it kind of a lackluster appearance. But other than that, I do think it is a good classic looking map, and I wanted to go back to it. Now, I mentioned that we have the tables appear as a menu item before, but part of the original map was that they had the tables and charts built directly onto the map itself. The only problem is when I put it on here, as you can see, it's a little bit difficult to see the information on the tables and charts. So what I did was I just created a mouse over. So if you hold your mouse over a chart or table that you want to read, you can see that it zooms in and makes it readable. This works for all the charts that are on the map as well as the terrain key. So I wanted to take a closer look at the player logs. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the expedition log as well to show you how they interact. So I'm going to go to the red log, and I'm going to build per the rule set. If you're familiar with the rule set, the second to last page in the rules gives you 3 example expeditions to help you get started playing the game. And the 3 expedition types that you're allowed to have are canoe, or mounted, which would be on horseback, or on foot. Now you can interchange at any time during the game from one type of expedition to the next. In other words, you could be a canoe expedition and then be hit by a disaster, lose your canoes, and then voila, suddenly you're a foot expedition because you lost your canoes. The same thing with the animals. You could have animals that you're riding and using for pack mount, and then hit with a disaster that kills your animals, and so again, suddenly you're a foot expedition. It's also possible that you could be a foot expedition and along the way pick up some animals and become a mounted expedition. But what's not possible is kind of a hybrid expedition. You can't be a canoe slash mounted or canoe slash foot. At any one time in the game, you're always going to be one of those types of expeditions. So if we look at the player log here, you're going to see how the automated function that I put in here is going to help you out with this. So I'm going to build, let me bring this over here so you can see what I'm building. This is from the rule book, the canoe expedition, which is one of the sample expeditions. As you can see, it's got 2 canoes, 16 bearers, 1 guide, 6 askaris, and so on. And it shows the portage cost total, the transport capability total, as well as the total cost of the canoe expedition. So I'm going to move this back over, then I'm going to build this, and then I'm going to bring it back over a little bit just to show you that it all works out. First thing, I'm going to add my 1 explorer. I could have left this up as a permanent item, but I decided to make it removable. So you could go to 0, but you can't go to 2, and there's really no purpose to ever be at 0, but just make sure that it is always set to 1 when you have your expedition out there. And let's go ahead and give him an occupation. Let's make him an ethnologist, anthropologist. It said we had 6 Ascaris, 16 bearers, and 1 guide. Okay, so I'm going to hold up right here real quick and do some explaining of what's going on in the log. As you can see, it added up the total number of people that are in this expedition, 24. It's also added up $510 as the cost for hiring the Ascaris, the bearers, the guides, and it'll also add any items that we buy later on. But the reason I wanted to halt here is because right now the log's making an interpretation. It believes, because I haven't purchased any canoes, because I haven't purchased any animals, that this is going to be a foot expedition right now. Now watch what happens when I add my 2 canoes, when I purchase my 2 canoes. You see that it changed its interpretation. It realizes that I'm no longer a foot expedition, so the transport capability that was being attributed to the bearers now switched to the canoes, which have a much greater transport capacity. 300 transport capability points per canoe for a total of 600, and then it subtotals down here for 600. You can see that it's also, as we're hiring and purchasing items, it's using this cost. So it costs $50 to hire an Ascari, $10 for each bearer, $50 for each guide. And it automatically adds those and sums them at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to keep adding on the predetermined expedition here, the sample expedition, 125 ration and 50 in gifts and 4 muskets. I believe that's going to finish it out. Okay, so we ended up with 24 members, 539 of portage cost, and 600 in transport capability. And let me bring my rules back over here. You can see 539 portage cost, 600 transport capability, $1,000, just like we have here. Here's our $1,000. So that worked out well. Now, so let's say that I switched from being canoes right now. Again, it's interpreting as a foot expedition, but let's add some animals. Okay, I'm over my monetary limit there, but that's okay. That's actually where the calculator here helps you, because as you're building, you'd be able to go, okay, I'm $300 overcharged, so I need to remove $300 worth of items. Perhaps, since I don't need that many bearers for the canoes anymore, I could go down to 8 and take off a couple of Ascaris, and she's still 120 over, so I'm going to come down 1 animal here, and go down to 50 there. Okay, so I'm just under my $1,000 there. But again, you'll notice that as soon as I added the animals, it realized this is no longer a foot expedition, and so it attributed the transport capability to the ride animals, the pack animals, for a total of 80 and a portage cost of 104. It's kind of a unique, I'm going to replace these again and go back to canoes because I want to show you the portage cost for the people when you have canoes. Okay, so again, this is one of the characteristics of having the canoes. There's a portage cost of 15 for each member in the canoe, and you'll see this add in here as soon as I put that in. So now the portage cost of 210 for the canoes. There's a relationship between the portage cost and the transport capability. So with the two canoes, I have a transport capability of 600, and as long as that transport capability is greater than the portage cost, there's no problem. It only becomes a problem if your portage cost exceeds your transport capability. And that's how those two numbers factor against each other. So the only other thing that I need to show you here is I'm going to go ahead and add some victory points. And as I added those, you can see over here on the red team, this column is completely filled out now, except for zeros in pack mounts and in ride mounts, and that's because I have zeros in those columns. And bonus items, we haven't added any bonus items because that will happen as you start your turn moving through the terrain. So you can see now how the expedition log works. You can see all the teams at one time, compare their data, compare the victory points, and even if it's not particularly important for you to know how many bearers the other team has, or guides and escaries, because honestly it's not really that important to know that individual information. It is nice to be able to have it all graphically displayed here on one log. And that's pretty much everything for the log. The only other factor, or only other enhancement on here that I want to show is once you return to Europe and you're like, okay, well, I have to start all over again with a brand new expedition, you can hit the Zeroize expedition button and it returns everything to zero. And then you go back to Europe, start collecting your donations, and you'll start an entirely new expedition based on whatever you decide that expedition is going to be. The rest of the log is pretty much as it has been with the previous Vassal modules for Source of the Nile. You just right click and type in information, and it just records whatever you're typing in. It's just visually there. It's not really stored or saved or transferred anywhere else. And so I believe that's everything you need to see about the new module. I really hope that if you're interested in playing Source of the Nile, that you give the module a shot. Go online, play with some friends, and if you find anything about the module that's incorrect, just remember that you know, when, like a lot of people, when you build these Vassal modules, you're not only the creator, but you're kind of your own quality assurance, and that usually doesn't work too well. It's like proofreading your own term paper, which means that you're going to ignore the same mistakes that you made the first time around. So if you find any errors in there, or anything that you would like to see in upcoming versions of the Source of the Nile module, just send me an email and let me know at clanmcrae9vassal@yahoo.com. That's CLANMACRAE9VASSAL@yahoo.com. Okay, until next time, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the module.